Where you were. Okay, guys. When you open SPSS, hey Marcy, I'm going to be shouting a little bit so maybe you can hear me and that will record a little bit better. I'll bring in a wireless microphone. You're going to notice when on the recording, if I walk away, you're not going to be able to hear me as well. But I'll try next time bring in a wireless mic so that it can be hooked up so it'll hear me all the way around the room. So when you open up that file in SPSS, this is what you should see. If you don't see this, you might be seeing this. Some of you might be seeing this instead, just one line across the top. There are two views in the data window in Excel. There's the data view and there's the variable view. If this is what you see, you may see that down here there's a little tab, data view and variable view. If you go into, I wonder if I can click it. No, it doesn't work. Oh, it's on my computer. It's running on my computer. It's not running on the smartphone. Okay. If you click on data view, you see the actual data. Right? The file number 2. Yeah, if you double click on it, it will automatically open SPSS. If that doesn't work, you can open SPSS and use the file, data, and then navigate, open it, it'll get a browser window and you can navigate to it. But most computers, if you double click it, it'll know what application it is because it's a .sav file. That's an SPSS data file.
Number 2 is intro, it says?
Yeah, intro. I think it says Excel intro SPSS or something like that. But it's the one number 2.
SPSS intro.
Yep. Okay, those numbers look familiar?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same numbers we were just working with, right?
Yep.
Okay. We're going to do exactly the same operation with SPSS that we just did with Excel. Okay, so first thing, we got to understand what we're seeing here. In the data view, we're seeing the variable name is up here on the top, BP, not part of the actual sheet here. Okay, the numbers are listed. Okay, variables are listed in the columns, and the individuals are listed in the rows. The subjects are the individuals listed in the rows. So we have 10 subjects here, just like we did before. We have one variable. The only variable is blood pressure. What kind of variable is that? Numeric variable, right? Okay, so we're going to find average, standard deviation. The kind of things we do with numeric variables is we want to know what the range is, what the middle is, the mean, how spread out they are, the standard deviation, that kind of stuff, right? So this view shows us the actual data. Now, this looks like Excel, but it doesn't work anything like Excel. You can't put formulas into this. All this does is display the data. All the other work goes through, for us, the menus. It also has a programming language called a syntax built into it that if you really want to play around with, it's pretty simple programming, a very English-like programming language that you could actually give it orders to do calculations and so on and so forth. And advanced users, they usually use that mechanism. We're going to be using the menus for the most part because it's really fast and easy. So one view we see here is we see the data view. We're actually seeing the data listed. Okay, the other view that we have here, if I go down to the bottom here, okay, and click on variable view, I see a single row. That single row describes the variable. That's why they call it the variable view. What's the name of the variable? BP. What kind is it? It's numeric. How many decimal places? No decimal places. Values. What kind of measure is it? Scalar. SPSS tends to use the term scalar instead of numeric. I'll click on that. It recognizes 3 kinds of variables: scalar, ordinal, and nominal. Right? Numbers, order, and names. This one's scalar. If you got the wrong one there, it may not do the analysis that you want. Right? And we'll take a look at that as an instance where that might happen. I'm going to go back to the data view just for the hell of it. Now, just so you know, I can also go between those views by clicking on View, and down here where it says Variable, if I drag down and click on Variable, it'll go to the Variable view. And if I go back and click on it, it'll go back to the Data view. Right? I can get between the views that way too. Okay, so now we're in the Data view. I want to do a statistical analysis now. Where's a good spot to look for a statistical analysis? There's a drop menu there's a function on the menu called analysis, called analyze. Let's click on analyze. What kind of statistics are we doing? Descriptives, right. So I'm going to scroll down. I have a number of options here. One of them is frequencies. What kind of data do you want to know frequencies on? Like how many of one type and how many of another type? Is that numeric data? Probably not, right? That's nominal data. How many males? How many females? How many different ethnicities? That's the kind of data that we would want frequencies on. So I'm not going to go in there right now. Descriptives, that sounds a little bit more promising, like mean, median, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go into descriptives. Okay, I come up with a window, and that window gives me a list of variables that I have that I can work with. In this particular data set, there's only one. Some data sets, you might have 50 or 100 different variables. Age, weight, BMI, blood pressure, so on and so forth. Lots of variables for each individual. Answers to survey questions, and so on. So now SPSS wants to know, what variable do you want to work with? Well, there's only one there. We have to move it into this box that says variables we want to work with. So you just highlight it and you click the little arrow and it moves it into the box that we want to work with it. There's options there. Some of these options are going to be relevant to you. Some of them are not going to be relevant. In this case, I click on options. A box comes up and it asks me, what analyses do you want to do? Hey, well, mean and standard deviation are already checked, minimum, maximum. I'm going to check variance and range also. Okay, I'm going to click continue, and then I'm going to click OK. Okay, SPSS goes through a process. The first thing that SPSS did is it had originally had a window that had a variable view and a data view. SPSS now brought up another window called the output window. All of the results from the analysis go on another window called the output window. If we do more analyses, they go onto the same window, and the same window, and the same window, and so on and so forth. Let's see what we got. Let's see, sample size, N, 25. Range is from 70 to 95, so the range is 25, right? Remember, it was minimum minus maximum. The mean, 82.5, same as we found before. The median, the standard deviation, 7.546. The variance, 56.944. Same results we got in Excel. Why would we use this instead of using Excel? Because if we're working with thousands of subjects or numbers, it's much easier to do this than to try and scan over or highlight a lot of numbers and so on. Excel works pretty well for small data sets, but this is much more efficient and it has much more functionality in statistics than Excel has. We're probably not going to see it as much as a professional statistician would be, but even then we'd have limitations if we were just going to use Excel. So we just did everything we did before, plus a little bit more. We did with just practically one little drop menu and a checkbox, a couple of checks, right? We got the results. Right? This is how this works. This is the power of what they call vertical software. Vertical software is software that serves a specific function, as opposed to Excel, which serves a lot of different functions. This is a vertical software. Okay, so now, one of the other things that's really great about this is that I can also do some other interesting things with this. Okay, Marcy, let's see. Okay, Marcy, I'm back. Hang on a second here. I'm going to open up Microsoft Word. Okay, and I'm going to hopefully make this go away. And here we go. Well, very frequently, it's very nice that you have this data in SPSS, right? They have a very nice little chart that it created for you. It filled in BP. I want to show you something else interesting. I'm going to go back to Analyze. I don't necessarily have to go back to the data view in order to do this. I'm going to go to Analyze. Actually, I want to go back to the data view. I can do that by going to Window and going to SPSS.intro. I'm back there. I'm going to go to the variable view. You notice that there's a column here called Label that's not in use right now. Okay, I'm going to type in there. I'm going to give a more complete description of BP. Okay, blood pressure of graduate students. Okay, now I'm going to go back and do our analysis again. Analyze. descriptive statistics, descriptives. It remembers the options that you chose to let. Oh, it forgot them. It made a liar out of me. Okay. Oops. I'm going to move. Oh, you know why? Because I didn't move the data. I didn't move it back in. Okay. I'm going to ask it to do that same analysis again. Notice it put blood pressure up. It showed the label instead of the variable name. I'm going to say OK. And this time it's going to come up with our output window. I may have to pull it up separately. But this time our output window in the description, I'm going to do it one more time so I can scroll it up and you can see it. Okay, there we go. You notice in the output window this time that it actually, instead of putting BP, it put blood pressure of graduate students, so that someone that doesn't know what our study was, that sees this table, has a little bit better description of what the data is, right? So this is a better table for using in a report, for instance. Okay, well, wouldn't it be great now if we could get this table into the report? And of course we can. If I go down there and I click on, and I highlight it, and I click on copy, or Control C, or whatever you want, whichever way you want to do it, or with your Mac, whatever, you know, it's Command C, I guess, right? Okay, I'm going to go back to Word, to my Word document, and I'm going to say paste. And there's the table in our Word document. You can now use this table in your reports, in your other courses, in your papers, and so on and so forth. And when you publish in a few years from now, when you're publishing in the Journal of the Public Health Association, American Public Health Association, you can use tables that you've generated in here. Some of the tables will be more complicated than this, some of the graphics, and so on and so forth. This is a valuable function for you. This means that you now have something that you can use that's very professional looking. Now, I just wanted to point one other thing out to you. When you paste stuff in, this is a small table, but you may find with some of the bigger tables that it extends past the margins of the page. In Word, you have a function most people ignore, that when they go to paste, they just say paste automatically. You also have something that says paste special. That gives you a bunch of options. It lets you paste it in as formatted text, which this box really is. Unformatted text, which is just the letters and numbers, so on and so forth. You can also paste it in as a picture, right? Instead of a box. I'm going to do that. Okay, so here's did I paste it in?
Which one did you choose? Which picture?
Oh, it's still in my clipboard, I hope.
Oh, because I have like picture in hand. Meta file. I have picture of PNG and JPEG.
Oh, you could use any one you want. Doesn't really matter. Let me copy this again. Edit, copy. Let me go back here and say paste special and picture. Oh, there it is. It just took a long time. You notice that these are pictures now. These three that I didn't give it time to paste it in because I'm slowed down because I'm on the network. I'm on the internet. These three are pictures. The one at the top is formatted text. I can take these pictures, I can resize them and move them around very easily, center them, so on and so forth. They're very easy to handle, and they'll never go outside. I can manage them so that they're never outside my margins. Sometimes you can get into a little trouble with the text boxes because you can see this one already kind of is pushing the margin on here. And like, you know how it is, it's a pain in the butt to try and highlight this whole thing and move these margins. You can do it if you don't mind the tedium and stuff, but I find it easier to paste in the picture instead. Now, you lose one bit of functionality, and that is that if you paste in the table itself, if you want to highlight or change a value, you don't have that option. Let's say I want to make that red. You can't do that in the other ones because they're pictures. You can't go in there and edit the text because they're just, like literally pictures. Okay, so you can choose which way you want to do it. Okay, I tend to do my highlighting and my editing in SPSS. Don't worry about that for right now. You can do it later on in this other version. Okay, so we just did literally the same thing that we did in Excel. Okay, let's open file number 3 now, and take this to the next step. Okay, and one of the ways, again, you can double click on the file. I am going to go up here so you can see me do it. I'm going to say open, data. I'm going to navigate to where the data is. It's in this PH750 session 2 file. And it is number 3, I think we're opening, right? Okay, number 3. I click open, and it opens that data set. Okay, now, this data set, you'll notice I added a variable. Okay, unfortunately, I can't blow it up easily. Maybe I'll figure a way that I can trick it. Maybe there's some enhancement I can add on the Mac that let me blow it up a little bit, make it easier to read. But the first variable is blood pressure. The second variable is sex, right? And instead of male or female, we see numbers 1 and 0. Well, we can tell what kind of variable is gender or sex? It's a nominal variable, right? It's not a numerical variable, even though it's a 0 and a 1, right? We would not add these zeros and ones. Let's see, there's 5 of each, right? So the average would be 0.5. And what would that average person be? They'd be a person with 1 breast and 1 testicle, right? So average with nominal variables is meaningless, right? Doesn't mean anything. So we don't use averages, we use frequencies with nominal variables. Okay, how many males, how many females in this particular data set? That's what's important to us. But now, which one is a male, which one's a female? Well, if you go to the variable view, that's the point at which you can code in these definitions. I'm going to go over here. You notice that BP, I'm going to put that label back in here. I'm just going to type in blood pressure, just to be neat. Okay, and you notice that there's already a label there for sex, which says gender of the patient, and right next to it, there's a box called values. Okay, where blood pressure is concerned, we didn't put anything into that box. It says none. Where sex is concerned, if you click in there, you'll see the values that I created there. 0 equals female, 1 equals male. Okay, I'm going to show you how I did that. I'm going to remove them. Okay, I'm going to tell it 0 means female. I'm going to add that one. I'm going to say 1 equals male. I'm going to add that one. So now SPSS knows what these numbers mean. Yes?
How did you get to that view?
I clicked down at the bottom here. You can click back and forth between data view and variable view. See, right now I'll go back to the data view. Now I'll go back to the variable view, data view, variable view. Okay, you can also get to it by under the view menu at the top. If you go up to the view menu at the top.
I mean, how did you do it for 0?
Oh, okay. First you have to be in the variable view, so you can work with the variables, and then you click into the box that says values. See, we have none for blood pressure because blood pressure is not a nominal variable. But we can click into the box for sex, values. There's a little gray box there you can click into, and it pops up that window. Is it working for you? See, there's a little gray, I'll show you again. There's a little gray box. If you click into that box, there's a little gray box that appears next to it. If you click into that, it brings up the table. Okay, and you can add those. I removed them just to show you how I put it back in. Just to show you how I did it. I didn't need to remove them. Okay, just to demonstrate it. So I'm going to go back to this view again, the data view again. So now, if you go up to view, one of the things you see there is value labels. That's one of the listings that you see under view. If I click that, it substitutes the value for the number. So you can see which ones are males and which ones are females. Okay. Now I'm going to go up to edit again. View again, I'm sorry, and go to value label again. Notice there's a check mark there. If I click it again, they go away. Right? So you can choose to do it any way you want. Okay, I'm gonna leave them showing as male and females. I'll go back into view and tell it to leave the value labels turned on. That's a toggle, right? Anytime you touch it, it switches it back and forth.
My value label is clickable. Highlight. It's like on
highlight. Oh, yeah, highlight. Does that help? It's not clickable. Do you have the options? Do you have like do you have them defined?
Oh, I have to be in database.
I think so, yeah. Yes, you do. Yep. Okay, so now let's do an analysis again. Okay, so now this time I'm going to go up to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics. You want to know something. Before I go any further, I say to myself, wouldn't it be interesting to get the average blood pressure for males and for females separately, right? Wouldn't that be of some interest? Well, first of all, before I do that, how many males and females are there? I'm going to go into frequencies for that information. Frequencies, I'm going to tell it that, well, blood pressure, I don't care about frequencies, just gender, because that's the nominal variable. Okay. I'm just going to say, okay, I'm not going to go into the statistics and so on and so forth. And it comes up with a table that tells me there are 5 females, 5 males, 50% of the survey is female, 50% is male, cumulative percentages, so on and so forth. Not very interesting for a very small data set like this. We could just see it, but for a larger data set with a lot more values for that variables like ethnicity, you'd be able to see how many of each ethnicity was in that database. Okay, good. Now I know how many males and females there are. Now let's see if I can get information about the blood pressures for those males and females. I'm going to go into Analyze, Descriptive Statistics. Now I know if I go into Descriptives, and I'm going to go in there momentarily, you don't have to, that all I'm going to be able to do is move blood pressure in. I'm not going to move gender in there because I don't want averages of gender. I'm going to move blood pressure in there, but there's no way for me to tell it males and females, right? So this doesn't do me much good. So I'm going to go a little further. I'm going to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Explore. Click on that, and this time I get a few more boxes I can work with. In this case, I'm going to move into what's called a dependence list, the numerical variable that I want to work with. Okay, that's blood pressure. That's what I want to find the average of. And then I'm going to tell it, it has a box below, it says factor list. When you factor a number, when you factor an equation, you break it up into its component parts. Factor 16, it's 4 times 4, right? Factor x squared, it's x times x. We're going to factor this into the different values for a nominal variable. I'm going to move gender in there. So it's going to break the data up into male and female. If I had ethnicity and moved it in there, it would have determined the averages for all the different ethnicities, etc. Okay, so now I'm going to say, okay, I have a bunch of options here that I'm going to choose. Right now, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And I'm going to say, okay. Okay, let me see what that gets me. Okay, oh, listen, it gets me a whole lot of stuff. Gets me the frequencies for males and females, 5 and 5. It gets me the blood pressures broken up by male and female, but not just blood pressures. It gives me the median. It gives me the variance, the standard deviation, the minimum, maximum, range, interquartile range, skewness, kurtosis, 95% confidence interval, all sorts of stuff we don't even know what it is yet, right? Right. So it gives me all sorts of information, and it separates it by male and female. The female average is 84. The male average is 81. So at the moment, based on this data, it looks like this population might have more females, higher blood pressure females than males. We don't know that. Remember, this is a sample. We use this. Our real objective is to learn about the population. But this has given us this kind of information. If I scroll up a little further, it gives me something called a stem and leaf plot. What this does is that it takes, for females and for males, it takes all of the values, right? For instance, it takes, let's see, how many females, what were the blood pressures for females? Well, there happened to be one female that was 70 and one female that was 75. There were no 80s. There was a 90, a 90, and a 95. It creates a little table where it puts in the last digit from the 2-digit numbers to represent the height or the frequency within that group of 90, within that group of 70. It's kind of an archaic way of doing it. Why do you think they might have done it this way? And it still lingers here. What did they not always have on computers 30 years ago or 40 years ago? Graphics, right? They didn't have graphics. They represent everything with numbers and dots. Have you guys ever seen something called Ascii Art? You know what that is? Every letter, every digit, every character is represented by an Ascii character from 0 to 128 for most of the ones that you work with, and really up to 256, right? 1 byte, which is 8 bits and so on and so forth, 256 possible numbers, right? 1 byte represents a letter or a number. And you can create art that's based on numbers printed on a page. And in fact, if you go online, you can probably find examples of this. And when I was in college and we were working with these giant, IBM 360s and stuff like that, and they could produce no graphics, it used to be people used to spend their time actually doing this. Here you go. Let me come up with one. Che Guevara. Okay, if you look at that, there's a dog. If you look at that closely, it's all made up in numbers and letters, right? Ascii Art. And that's what we used to do. We used to have art that was based on replicating images based on using these ASCII characters, letters and numbers, because we didn't have it. So if you look at this, this is really a histogram laid on its side. Because the more people in the 70s you have, the larger that line's going to be.
So,
and yes.
So to interpret that again, so for
there's two people in the 70s, nobody in the 80s, and 3 people in the 90s. And you can even see what the actual numbers are. One person's 70, one's 75. One person's 90, another one's 90, another one's 95. Right? And if you look at males, we have 4 80s and one that was greater than 85. Right? So, and that's the way it showed it. So now, yeah, and the males, it's funny. I some reason or other, I randomly assigned these numbers, and I wound up giving all the males like 80. Right? Whatever. That's why you don't see another box plot next to this thing. Okay, let me just show you. If I go back here and I rerun this analysis, descriptive statistics, explore. Except this time I go into the options. I go into plots and tell it I wanted to do a histogram as well. And say okay. It'll also produce histograms for you. Now this data is not really something that's really conducive. It's only 5 people in each group. So it doesn't really give you a very representative histogram. But if you look at this, there's one person that's 70, one person that's 75, 2 that are in the 90s, and 1 that's 95. So this is your histogram for females. And the males are almost all 80s, and one person that's more than 85. Okay, so I mean, it's not a very good plot, but we're going to get into situations where it'll be a little bit more descriptive. So what have we used here? All we did was open the file, right? And this file is something that we could have typed this data in, right? We could have actually typed this data in. We could have gone to variable views and made sure that the variable names and the labels and all that kind of stuff is correct, typed it in as we needed it, and then we'd be able to start working with this. Another way to do this is I'm going to say File, Open, Data. And I'm going to go into my my folder that's on my desktop. You guys are not going to have this most likely. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, let's see, I see a data set here, North Carolina birth file.xls. It's an Excel file, but it's grayed out. I can't click it, right? The reason why I can't click it is because right now, the formats of files that SPSS is looking for is only .sav, only its own files. I click on that and tell it I want to look for either portable files, SciStat files, Lotus files, Silk files, SAS files. SAS is another statistical program. Or, for instance, Excel files. You can even say all files somewhere in here. Okay, but I'm going to say, I know it's an Excel file, so I'm going to click Excel file. Now, suddenly I can see the Excel files highlighted here. So I can actually click on that and say open. SPSS now tells us it sees data between A1 and 0801 and letter O 801. Big data set. And that sounds right. And right now it says, I think that the variable names are in the top row, like they were in our data set. BP was in the top row, right? That's checked off. So if I'm right, then it'll take the variable name and put it into SPSS automatically because it'll see it's the top row of my Excel spreadsheet. If I'm wrong, it'll take the top row of data and think it's a variable name, right? And I'll lose a row of data. So I really should have opened it and looked at it first. But I'm gonna roll the dice and say, yeah, read the variable name from the top row. Okay, and I say, oh, and one of the clues on that is I see it's probably 800 people and it's 801 rows. So I think I'm right. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, and SPSS will import that Excel data set into SPSS. And here's that data set imported in SPSS. And in fact, if you look up there, see, I was right. Those were these were all the variable names. You can move these around, spread them out and stuff, just like you can in Excel. Okay, if I go to variable view, it'll give me a list of all the variables, their names. Well, since I imported it to Excel, it guessed that whether it was a nominal variable or an ordinal variable. We might have to check that on occasion, okay, or scale a variable. It didn't give me labels. It only gave me the variable name. The variable names tend to be very compact. Yes, sure. You want me to do the import again? Okay. Okay, let me see. Okay, I'm gonna even have to close this. I'm gonna say open data. I'm gonna navigate to the folder where my data is. I'm gonna tell it that I'm looking for an Excel file. I'm gonna click on the Excel file. I'm gonna say open. It says read the variable name from the first row of data. Well, across the top, the first row of data, it happens to be the variable name, gender, blood pressure, so on and so forth. And the data itself is on that worksheet from cell A1 all the way down to cell O801. So it's whatever that is, like 18 columns and 800 rows. Okay, I'm going to say OK. And it literally imports it and creates a new file. Right now, I'm in the variable view. I can click on data view, and it shows me the actual data. Okay, now you'll notice, for instance, marital status. It doesn't say what marital status is, just puts ones and twos, right? I have to tell it that. I have to go into the variable view and to tell it that marital status is 1 is married, 2 is unmarried, 3 is divorced, and so on and so forth. Where do I get that information? Usually this data is summarized with a code book. And the code book says, hey, listen, for everything we do with this data set, when we talk about the married variable, 1's going to represent this, 2's going to represent, 3's going to represent. So you need that code book in order for you to figure out what these are. Okay, and for gender, you need that code book to tell you, well, 1 represents male, 2 represents female, and so on and so forth, or whatever numbers that they assign to it. Okay, we're gonna get to that, but that's how you would import it, right? So you can take an Excel file data set or many other different kinds of files where you accumulated data, bring them into SPSS, and then do an analysis in SPSS. And we're about to do that. Okay, so that's the way you would import it. So SPSS, we've learned how to open an SPSS file, raw file, how to import an Excel file into SPSS, how to begin to manipulate the variables, the variable description a little bit, right? Not a lot, just a little bit, just to get started. And we've also learned that there's 3 windows here we're working with so far. The data window, the variable window, and the output window. Notice the output window, everything I'm doing is accumulating in this output. Whoops, I got the wrong one. Where is it? Did I close it? I might have closed it while we were working. No, I don't know what I did with it. Everything was accumulated up until this point in the output window. Okay, so at any rate, I'm going to get this out of it. I'm going to close these.
Can you get it to drop into a new? Or you have to close the one you're in?
You can. I have several of them open right now. You don't have to close the one you're in. Right. So I'm closing all the windows now. I have like 6.
In the result or the output?
The output should accumulate into a single window, I think. I could be wrong though. It may accumulate into different windows. But when you're working with a single data set, definitely every time you do an analysis, it just keeps adding on to the end. Right? So it's all there. In fact, one of the things that you have to remember to do is when you quit SPSS and you say, well, I edited the variable view, so I want to save my changes, and you save that file. If you don't save the output window separately, the output window's gone. Okay, you have to save it as a separate file. Here's the output window here's one of the output windows. I'm going to say save as, and it's going to save it as a file with a .spo postscript, right? A different file. So you need to give it a name, tell it to save it as well, if you want to remember the output window and not have to do the analysis again. The other thing you can do with the output window is that remember, anything you do, you can click on it, copy it, paste it into Word.
So if you have multiple output windows open at the same time,
Yeah, I believe you can, yes.
how does it be able to drop it in?
I guess because it probably associate, the real answer to that is I'm not positive. I'm not sure. You'd have to check it. It might be different on different versions, so yeah, I think most likely since I closed one and I have another one, yeah, I think since I wound up with multiple output windows, my version might have been keeping separate output windows for each data set. But within that data set, definitely just adds to the same output window. Okay, and the other thing you do with the output windows is that you can, if I click in the output window, you can say export, and you can export it to an RTF file, rich text file, or a Word file. I went to File. I have the output window open. I go to File, say Export, and among other choices, you can export it as a Word or an RTF file, or text or PDF, and so on and so forth. Right? So it gives you a bunch of options. Okay, so what have we learned? We learned how to open a file, learned how to import a file from Excel. We learned how to do a little bit of manipulating of the variable description. We learned how to do some simple analyses, analyze descriptive statistics frequencies for nominal data, descriptives for data that we don't want to break up into groups, and explore for data that we want some more flexibility, we want some more graphics, we want to be able to break it up into groups like ethnicities and genders and marital status and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to close this for now. Okay, yeah, let me go. Okay, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit this for a second just to get it out of the way. No, okay. So now I'm going to open up my file number 4, which is the North Carolina. It's a subset of data collected in North Carolina the course of a year on births during the course of that year. Okay, it's a subset in that it's only 800 of them. I think the original file probably had like 40 or 50,000 births. So I'm going to double click on that. It's going to open up SPSS. I'm hoping that this one's coded. I think it was. That's the reason why I might have picked the wrong one, but I'm pretty sure it's coded. Still there, Marcy? Okay, I double clicked it so it opened a couple of times. In fact, I can see right away this one's coded, right? Because you can see male and female and stuff like that. If I go over to variable view, you can see that under values, you can spread that out a little bit. You can see that many of these are coded. The numerical variables are not coded. For mother's age, M age is age of mother, right? So the variable name is M age, which is pretty much wouldn't mean anything to someone that doesn't know what this data set is. But when I produce a table or a chart, it's going to actually use age of mother, the label that we put in here. And that it doesn't have a value because the value is a number. But if I looked at marital status, that's a nominal variable, right? And we have values filled into that. I'm going to click in there and click that gray box, and 1 is married and 2 is not married. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the data view just because it's comfortable for me to look at that, and it's easier for me to figure out what the data is. Let me see what I have here. Plurality is the number of children born of this pregnancy, twins or single children. Sex of the child. Notice if I hover, it shows me the label. Okay, and mother's age, weeks, completed weeks of gestation, marital status, the race of the mother, the whether or not the mother is Hispanic or not, how much weight the mother gained during pregnancy, whether the mother smoked during pregnancy. Let's look at that smoking during pregnancy and see if that. Somebody just asked me about that before, right? About smoking status. Let's see what the smoking status means here. I got to click in here to figure this out. And mother did smoke during pregnancy, and a mother didn't smoke during pregnancy. Nothing about she had smoked before pregnancy or whatever. So this is pretty cut and dry. Just did or didn't, right? Maybe, I don't know what they would use as a cutoff. 1 cigarette? I have no idea. Maybe just they asked her and forced her to check a box, yes or no. Okay, so now let's say we want to do analysis on this, right? So I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say to myself, we're getting a little bit advanced here. I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say to myself, gee, I'd be curious whether the weight of the infant when it's born, this is the weight of the child in ounces when it's born, and this is the weight of the child in grams whether it's born. I can use either one. It's going to be equivalent, right? So I wonder if whether the mother smoked or not had an effect on the weight of the infant. Okay, so where will I go? Go to analyze. I want to find the mean, right? I want to find the average weights. I'm going to go to descriptive statistics. Since I want to break it up into groups, I'm going to go to explore. And then I'm going to go into the dependence list. I'm going to say, let's put the weight of the child in ounces into dependence list. And the factor is going to be whether or not the mother smoked during pregnancy. Okay, so now I'm going to click on statistics. Right now, it's going to find all of the descriptives for me. It's checked off. It doesn't ask me to figure out anything else. And I'm going to check onto plots, and I'm going to say, give me a histogram. In addition to the stem and leaf, it always does a box plot automatically, but it does a stem and leaf. You could uncheck that if you don't think it's going to be useful to you. But I'm gonna check off histogram. I want to see histograms for these two groups, and it's checked off to give me both statistics and the plots. And then I'll click OK. Remember, this is 800 women that we're looking at now. Could have been 36,000. It doesn't matter. And what are the results? I got 684 women who didn't smoke and 114 women who did smoke, my frequencies for my nominal data. The average weight of child for mothers who did not smoke was 117 ounces. For mothers who did smoke, is 109 ounces. Mothers who smoked had smaller babies on average than mothers who didn't smoke. Does that mean that that's true for the entire population of North Carolina? We don't know. This is a sample. We'll be learning as the semester goes on to understand whether that difference is due to chance, because it's a sample, or whether that difference is really likely to be true in the entire population. That's what this course is all about. Understanding when you see a difference like that, what's the likelihood that it's going to be due to chance? But it's a very powerful piece of software. We got all this information on all these women just like that, just as quickly as we got the average for 10 people on those bogus numbers I made up before. I'm going to scroll up. Here's our histogram. Is this histogram skewed? It is. What direction is it skewed in? To the left, or negatively skewed, because there were babies that were much smaller that were pulling the average down. So the median stays in the middle, but because there's some babies that were really prematurely born, that were really premature, it tends to pull the average to the left, but the median is resistant and it stays there. So it's negatively skewed or skewed to the left. Okay, and there's our histograms for mothers who did smoke during pregnancy. It's a much smaller set. That's why it looks like more of a block diagram, right, than the other one does. Okay, but that's also negatively skewed. We had a few babies that were born prematurely in that group also. Now, interestingly enough, see this small data set? See how it looks kind of blocky? You can see it's normally distributed. Most babies are around this weight. Fewer babies are much heavier. Fewer babies are much lighter. You tend by chance to get normal distributions, right? For certain functions. Okay, and especially with things are really determined by chance more than anything else. Okay, so now you get this normally shaped distribution, this bell curve that we see so much. If you look at this distribution where we had many more women involved, look, it starts to look more and more like a line than a bunch of blocks. Eventually, if you get enough people, it's gonna look like a nice curve. There's an equation that describes that curve. That all you need to know exactly how the path that curve follows is really the mean and the standard deviation. We're going to be looking at that equation. We're going to glance at it and run away, right? Because you never really use that equation. You use your computer or a table to tell you facts about the distribution. Okay, you don't use that formula. That formula has it's natural logarithms and e to this and so on and so forth. It's really ugly. I'll show it to you next week. Right? Yeah. So I won't show it to you now because I want to make sure you come back next week. But you never use the formula. Yes.
I have a question. I thought, so can you explain negatively skewed? I thought it was positively skewed because more of the positive numbers.
Well, actually, we're looking at what happens to the mean, right?
Okay.
So in other words, the mean and the median, if we have a perfect normal distribution, right, perfect bell curve, it's symmetrical on both sides, the mean and the median are both together. Now, if you get someone that is much higher, right, the median doesn't change because it's still a middle person. But what happens to the mean? It goes higher. That's positively skewed. So if the person that is higher, he's pulling the mean up
Right.
to the right or positively. In this case, the premature babies are pulling the mean down. So it's negatively skewed. Okie doke. Okay. So look at this. What do we see here? That's our stem and leaf plot. And I really believe stem and leaf plots there. This kind of a remnant to when the days when SPSS was strictly they did the graphics using ASCII characters instead of plots, but it's the same shape. So in fact, we can tell that between I guess 67, 67. There were 67 babies that were between 1,100. Was it? What were these numbers? 110 ounces and 100 ounces and 105. There were 56 between 105 and 111. Between 111 and 115, there were 67, 91 between 100, whatever. You get the idea, right? That's how that stem and leaf plot. But if you look at it, it really is this plot sideways, right? In fact, you can see that the extreme value is down there. Okay, so now look at the box plots. Here's our box plots. Okay, on the right-hand side is women who smoked during pregnancy. On the left-hand side is women who didn't smoke during pregnancy. That black line in the middle is the median, not the average, but the median, right? Which one has a higher median, higher weight, average, middle weight? The women who didn't smoke during pregnancy. Okay, now the width of that box represents the values for the middle 50%. The bottom part of that box is the 25th percentile. 25% of the people were below that number. And the top of that box represents the 75th percentile. So the people that are between the bottom line and the top line, in other words, between about 105 and 130 ounces, that's 50% of the babies. That's called the interquartile range. It's the values between the number of people between 25th percentile and the 50th percentile. And the people from the 50th percentile to the end is that last percentile, is the upper percentile. That's 100%. That little feather at the top there is the highest value or the biggest baby. Okay, now you'll notice that both of these have numbers that SPSS automatically ignored and said, they're too low to really be, I really shouldn't include them because there's something wrong with those numbers. They're so far from the mean that I think you should consider not using those numbers, considering them, what do we call them? Outliers, right? SPSS has a rule built into it where it suggests, based on how many standard deviations from the mean that those numbers are, that it uses to suggest maybe these are outliers, you should look at it. But you really have to consider what kind of data it is, whether they really are not outliers, if you want to use SPSS's rules, or you want to impose another rule on SPSS. But notice that there's a lot of outliers here. There's some for the, this happens to be a smaller population than women that smoked, so there aren't quite as many outliers. But what are these? These are premature babies, right? So there might be something entirely different going on with these babies. And in fact, it might be legitimate if you're comparing just the effects of smoking, whether or not you want to include those outliers. Okay, and these outliers in both cases tend to pull the mean, not the median, don't affect the median much, tend to pull the mean down. So they're negatively skewing the output, or to the left if you're looking at the histogram. Okay, how are we doing on time? Almost 8 o'clock. Okay, so now I just want to go over a couple of real quick. I just want to go over these things again. Okay, and just review the homework a little bit. And let me see what else I got here that I want to look at. Let's see, 5, histogram, let me just pull this up. Okay, just to review this. Okay, play. Okay, here's our histogram. Here's a line overlaying it that kind of shows you what it would look like if it were a normal distribution. Okay, here, this is the way a histogram might be assembled if you were going to do it from scratch. Okay, if you look at the top box up there, those are all the individual values. You had a person that, let's say it's blood pressures, 100, next person at 105, next person 105, next person 110. So you organize them into blocks. Then you take those blocks, you see how many there are, you look at the frequency, and you build a table from those frequencies. There's 3 people that have blood pressures between 100 and 109. There's 8 people that have blood pressures between 110 and 119. There's 12 people between 120 and 112, so on and so forth. Then you build a table or a histogram out of those. The important thing about histograms is if you look at this, is that, I'm sorry I'm so low, this chair is like a foot tall. Okay, if you look at this, here's the 3 people that are in that first block of 100 to 109. Here's the 8 that are in the next block. If you look at this, they're next to each other because it's a continuum, right? In other words, if a person is 109, if his blood pressure is 110, he goes into that box. If he's 112, he stays here. If he's 113, 115, 19, 120, he goes in here. There's no gap between them. A person, every subject winds up in a box. That's why they're glued up against each other. Most of the time when you see box plots, they're separated because you're either male and female. It isn't a numerical continuum, so you see them separately, right? There's a lot of different kind of box plots, but histograms, usually what we're interested in, bar charts, you're mostly interested in displaying how the frequencies for nominal variables, okay? This is a whiskey bar chart, right? This is a candy bar chart. And of course, the sushi bar chart. So that's, and now box plots are interesting because they give us a different kind of perspective on this. Okay, if you look at this bar chart, what is this number right here? That's the lowest value. What is this number up here? That's the highest value. What's that black line? Median. That's the median, right? Okay, what is this line right here? That's 25th percentile, right? 25% of the people are below this, 75 are above. This is the 75th percentile. 75 are below, 25 are above. So in between here and here are 50%, middle 50% of the values for blood pressure in this case. That's the interquartile range. A lot of people use the interquartile range just to get an idea of where's the middle 50% of these people. And the median is here. Now, let me ask you a tricky question. Is this distribution skewed? Where would you expect the median to be if it wasn't skewed? Expect it to be right in the middle, right? Okay, where it's up here, right? So which direction is it skewed?
Positively.
Negatively, right? Because you have values that are pulling the mean down, right? The median is here, but the average is going to be somewhere else because you got low values that are low all the way down here that are pulling the average down. When I first took this many years ago, that I had a hard time with that also, because I kept thinking, what do you mean? All the data's up here is skewing it that direction, but that's not the case. You want to look at yourself and say, the median's here. Where's the mean now? Is the mean being pulled away from the median in this direction, or is the mean being pulled up? In this case, the mean is being pulled by those outliers, being pulled down or negatively. If this were a histogram, it would look kind of like this, right? Yes. Okay, with like a big tail at the low end, for those values, for these low values here. Okay. Let me see what else I might want to show you here. Oh, I want to show you. Wait. Okay, I'm going to get this working.